over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. Opened the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into...
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
It was June 12th when Israel launched attacks on the Iranian nuclear and military structures. And I think it's safe to say that Iran gave as good as it got, if not better. And since that time, for the most part, Iran has been off of the front pages of most of Western media. Let's turn to my guest for some insight into what's going on in Iran today. He is a professor of English, literature, and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. He is Dr. Seyed Mohammad Marandi. Dr. Marandi, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me, Wilmer.
It's great to talk to you. It's been too long. Before we get to events in Iran, I'd like to get your thoughts on recent developments in Gaza. Press TV reports Gaza already facing famine, but UN prevented from declaring it officially. In an interview with Press TV, Alex de Waal, a British anthropologist and executive director of the World Peace Foundation, stressed that the war crime of starvation is prohibited under international law, referring to the ongoing siege and starvation in the Strip. He said the UN lacks data on the famine in the besieged territory because Israel is not allowing aid agencies to the ground to collect the necessary information. And I'm sure you've seen very recently Netanyahu saying that any claims of starvation in Gaza are just bold-faced, big fat lies. Dr. Marandi.
I think it's becoming clear to the entire world what's really happening, even though the Western media, Western elites, Western governments, Western diplomats, politicians, they've all been trying to hide this reality during the last 2 years, but the objective has always been the extermination of the Palestinian people and to ethnically cleanse not just Gaza, but all of Palestine from a Palestinian presence. One thing that we haven't been hearing at all in the Western media is the rapid ethnic cleansing that's going on in the West Bank and the daily killings of Palestinians and the theft of their assets, their goods, their livestock, and theft from their shops by colonizers who are accompanied by military troops and officials. The Western media is simply hiding this reality, but the world now sees through it. It's largely, of course, because of the nature of the new technologies and the fact that it is so overwhelming. Even though Facebook and Instagram are deleting posts or X shadow bans heavily, but it's just so bad. The starvation, the scenes coming out of Gaza, the rapes that we see taking place in Israeli prisons, the targeting of children, uh, the hunting that these Israeli snipers uh, carry out, and how they have games. One day they decide to shoot children in the legs, then what, the next day in the head, the next day in their other sensitive areas of their body. All of this is coming out simply because it's happening 24 hours a day, every day. And no matter how much is censored, uh, so much is coming out and so much is being seen across the world. There are only two things really that surprise me. One is the degree to which Western media is willing to be complicit in this Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
That for me is shocking.
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought by now they would have forced this to end. A year ago at least.
Mm-hmm.
But it's stunning how far they can go. The second thing that is shocking to me is the degree to which some countries in the region are willing to close their eyes to this genocide. Erdogan in Turkey, he continues to do trade, he transports oil, he has diplomatic relations. It's as if some small difficulty between the two sides continues, but otherwise it's business as usual. The Egyptian government, Sisi, he too refuses to break off ties. Jordan, the Emirates. It's amazing how these countries, or their governments at least,
Mm-hmm.
are unwilling to do anything to stop this Holocaust. You would think that by now all of these countries would have joined a coalition to wage war against this regime, sort of like what you would expect anywhere else in the world. If there was a genocide or a Holocaust taking place somewhere in Africa or Latin America or Asia or Europe or North America, you would expect that by now that regime that was carrying it out would have been overthrown by foreign forces to spare the population. But the indifference in the West and the indifference among these regimes in the region, these are the two most stunning things for me.
Your thoughts on the weaponization of food? The what I have labeled, I've just written a piece. Palestinians are not starving; they're being starved. And in my opinion, that's not merely a distinction without a difference. There's a real difference between the two. And I see this starvation as Israel's final solution.
Yes, there's no doubt in my mind that this is the final solution, and there's no doubt in my mind that this is what the collective West wants. But it's becoming so ugly and so obvious to people across the West who are heavily propagandized by Western media and by their school textbooks and about the narratives that the states across the West create, that until now, because of all that propaganda, they have not been, ordinary people have not been able to see the reality of the world that they live in, both at home and abroad. And now, though, this is changing. People are seeing the reality,
Mm-hmm.
and the reality is increasingly ugly. And so, Western governments are in a dilemma because until now they've been not just trying to hide the reality on the ground in Gaza. They've not just been apologetic,
Mm-hmm.
but they've been funding this Holocaust. They've been supporting this Holocaust throughout, and they continue to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But now, all of a sudden, because the images have become even more outrageous than before, we see that Western politicians are behaving as if this comes as a shock to them. You see Obama give this terrible tweet, which it would have been better if he hadn't even reacted,
Mhm.
or the British Prime Minister, or Hillary Clinton. These people who are obviously have always been very much supportive of this policy of the Israeli regime. Even for them, it's gone too far. Not because it's a moral issue for them, but because people have woken up.
It's a
People are
bad
seeing
political
reality.
issue.
Exactly. So it's not as if they're any less genocidal than Netanyahu. It's that they are being exposed as genocidal. This, I think, is the key factor in that all red lines have been crossed. And it isn't as if hasn't been a policy of the West in the past. They've done this across Africa. They've done this in Latin America, the conquistadors, the destruction of Africa. These are things that we read about in history books.
Mhm.
The Second World War, what the different European empires did across Asia, the Holocaust, the genocides, the slaughter, all of these are documented in history.
Mhm.
But we've never seen a genocide, a Holocaust being carried out live in front of the eyes of the world, in front of our eyes, day and night. We wake up in the morning. Sometimes, literally, the first thing that I see are images of this Holocaust. When I go to bed at night, uh, literally, again, sometimes the last thing I see are again images of the ongoing Holocaust, and this continues day and night. So there's a difference between the behavior in the past and the behavior today. Usually, even the most evil despots, they hide
Mhm.
their evil acts. The European empires even in the 20th century, the most demonized, of course, is Hitler himself.
Mhm.
Hitler never spoke about uh, exterminating Jews or Gypsies or Slavs or whoever in public,
Mhm.
and we didn't see images of, or people back then didn't see images of these happening day and night. They tried to hide it. Saddam Hussein, another monster that we Iranians know quite well, never boasted about a genocide. He never filmed his crimes and
Mhm.
broadcast, showed them on live television for the world to see. In the past, those who were sinister tried to hide their evilness, but now it's as if it's fine for many of these Israeli leaders. It's as if it's something to brag about. Even now, you hear statements made by senior Israeli officials literally every day about exterminating the Palestinian population, and Western media doesn't even report them. We only hear about them through social media, and if we follow people who closely follow the issues
Mhm.
of Palestine.
France, Ireland, Spain, and one or two other countries are claiming that they will recognize Palestine as a state. French President Emmanuel Macron said he will formalize the decision at the UN Assembly in September, and that he's also sent a letter to Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. That when I first heard Macron say they were going to recognize Palestine as a state, I said, "Oh, huge development." But then when he mentioned Mahmoud Abbas, I said, I think there's something fishy going on here, because who does Abbas really represent other than Western interests, sir?
I think it's even far worse than that. I think basically what Macron and others are doing is that they're buying time for the Israeli regime. Uh, if there are no Palestinians, recognizing a Palestinian state means nothing. And France is not sanctioning the Israeli regime. They're not ending their economic, political, military cooperation with the regime. In fact, it has been said by credible sources that French Airways is used to their direct flights are used to take military hardware to the Israeli regime. So uh, while they are accomplices in this Holocaust in every way and form, the declaration of the intention to recognize the Palestinian state, in my opinion, is directed mostly at a domestic audience because people are increasingly outraged, and so they want to uh, silence their critics or make their critics feel that they're moving in the right direction. And probably to a much lesser extent, it is directed towards the international community because the Israeli regime, through its genocide, it has demolished the image and credibility of the entire West. The West is not seen as more civilized than others. It's seen, in fact, as less civilized, if civilized at all. People across the world are seeing this. So, in order to preserve its what's left of its shattered image, I would imagine that this is also directed at an international audience. But it has absolutely no impact on the ground. It's just empty words. And as you pointed out, Mahmoud Abbas is basically the Israeli regime's jailkeeper. Just like in apartheid South Africa, you had uh, local rule among subordinate Africans who were basically controlled by the apartheid regime in South Africa. This does not bring about freedom. This does not bring about security. This only legitimizes uh, apartheid, racism, and genocide, in my opinion. The only move that would make any difference, that would be of any significance whatsoever, would be for serious sanctions to be imposed upon the regime, for diplomatic relations to be downgraded. In the case of Turkey and Egypt and Morocco and the Emirates and Jordan, they should break off relations completely and immediately in all trade. But in the case of the Europeans, the least that they could do is to downgrade relations and impose economic and military sanctions on the regime. But that's not something that we're going to see, even if the extermination continues for another year.
So, shifting now to Iran. How is life in your country post the U.S. backed and U.S. involved attack on June 12th? Let's start with that. How are things going in Iran?
One thing that I just wanted to add was that nothing will change in the West unless people force change upon these regimes.
Yes.
Or in Turkey, if Erdogan is forced to cut off his strategic relationship with Netanyahu, or in Egypt, it's the responsibility of people to push and to force these governments to change policy. In Iran, the situation is back to normal now. I think it's pretty clear that Iranians are expecting a second, let's say, round of aggression by the Israeli regime and Netanyahu's sidekick Trump. But it's not clear when. The Iranians are swiftly preparing themselves for further another war of aggression. Although I think that the Trump and Netanyahu have lost the advantage because they gave it their best shot. This was a so-called regime change operation. It wasn't about Iran's nuclear program. They were foolish enough to believe their own propaganda that Iran was a house of cards. and they took their best shot. They used the best technology that they had available. The weapon systems were used um, that Zelensky could only dream of, and the attack was overwhelming, and they had the full support of the entire West. The Europeans, when this war of aggression began, as negotiations were taking place, and the United States used negotiations as a cover to deceive Iran and as deception. When this war began, Europeans supported the Israeli regime. The Israeli regime has the right to defend itself. This is a upside down world that we're living in today. And when the Israeli regime struck and the American regime struck Iranian nuclear sites, all of which were being monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency, every single one of them, everything in these three installations were regularly being visited by these International Atomic Energy Agency experts.
If I could jump in right there just really quickly. One of the points I've been making for a very long time is that I think it was under the JCPOA, Iran was allowed to develop to 6.9 or 6.7%, enrich to 6 point, something along that line. And that when Donald Trump took the United States out of the agreement, Iran decided to enrich beyond that point. But I always saw that as Iran trying to demonstrate its capabilities to bring the West back to the table, not in an effort to develop a weapon, because we know the fatwa has said that's not going to happen. Was my logic accurate?
You're absolutely correct. Those facilities, that's exactly why Iran allowed them to be monitored, because they were peaceful. And the reason why Iran went above 3.6% enrichment of uranium was in one case, when they took it to 20%, they had a very practical justification, because we do use enriched uranium at 20% for producing medical isotopes at the Tehran experimental reactor, and it's used for other purposes as well. And so, but Iran went above 20% to 60%, basically to put leverage at the negotiating table, as you rightly pointed out, because we all know that the United States and the Europeans, they are ruthless. We've seen that in Gaza. We've seen that in Syria. We've seen that in Lebanon. They are willing to do anything to get their way. And in Cuba, for example, which is under maximum pressure sanctions, which the nation is basically being brought, the Americans are attempting to bring the nation to its knees, a nation which is really no threat at all to the United States. If Cuba had leverage, the United States would be forced to take a different stance. So the Iranians know that just sitting at the negotiating table with the Americans and the Europeans is not going to do them any good. They have to have something to put pressure on them. And enriching uranium, even at 99.99%, does not run against the regulations of the NPT or the International Atomic Energy Agency. The weaponization of a nuclear program violates the agreement, but the enrichment itself is not illegal at all.
And just really quickly, a huge part of that weaponization issue is the development of a delivery system, which I have never heard anybody in the West report that Iran has been involved in.
Absolutely, and it's ironic that it's really Trump that has been moving Iran closer to a potential or the ability to have a nuclear weapon. Because Trump tore up the nuclear deal, a deal which the Americans from day one was violating. The
Right.
United States was violating it under Obama, and then Trump tore it up. So the Iranians, after Trump tore up the deal, the Iranians continued to abide by their commitments, even though many in Iran were opposed to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a year, Iran gradually reduced its commitments to put pressure on the United States. And after 2 years, the Iranians went all out in expanding their peaceful nuclear program. Again, both because it's their right, but also to put pressure on the United States because the United States and the Europeans were targeting women and children. They are trying to crush ordinary people through maximum pressure sanctions. So so Trump basically pushed Iran to expanding its peaceful nuclear program, and then now by bombing Iran, the Iranians have they've ended their cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the United States and Europeans no longer have any access. So basically, what Trump has done is he's made the Iranian nuclear program more secret,
Mm-hmm.
and he's pushed the Iranians towards expanding the nuclear program. And of course, if the Iranians feel that there is an existential threat to the existence of the nation, then that fatwa could change. And the threats that the Americans and the Israelis are imposing on the Iranian people and the war that they've carried out and the attempt to overthrow the state, they didn't just carry out attacks on Iranian assets. They tried to murder the president. They tried to murder the head of the judiciary. They tried to murder the Speaker of Parliament. They murdered senior commanders. They were out to destroy the country. And so under those circumstances, you see that there is an increasing sense of danger for the nation. And under extreme circumstances, you can envisage a situation where the fatwa could change, because preserving this nation, which has thousands of years of history, an ancient civilization, is of course of utmost importance to the leaders in this country. Right now, a strong majority of Iranians are critical of the government because they believe that Iran should have a nuclear weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So Trump has not only pushed Iran closer to a nuclear weapon, they've shifted public opinion in the country towards an argument that Iran needs a nuclear weapon.
So,
and therefore, Trump is creating an environment which is the exact opposite, which the result could be the exact opposite of what he intended.
I was going to say, so the adage, be careful what you pray for, because you just might get it. All of this discussion about regime change has been, the narrative here is that if the West is able to bring about regime change in Iran, that would result in a more favorable Western government. But what you're saying is no, based upon the actions of the West, that there could be an even more anti-Western government that would replace the Khomeini government.
Well, I would say that regime change is impossible.
Okay.
And the legitimacy of the state among ordinary Iranians has always been high.
Mm-hmm.
But ironically, as a result of this war, the popularity of the leader and the armed forces has gone through the roof. And this is something, again, that would have been obvious to me, but apparently the West was taken by surprise. And then again, it's because
I have said repeatedly, sanctions don't work. They create a heightened sense of nationalism in a country, and it allows those in charge to say it's now them versus us, and people will rally around their government. They will rally around their country It's not regime. Sanctions do not foment unrest. They foment nationalism.
And also, in the case of Iran, religious revival,
Yes.
or a surge in religiosity. And it's not just the state that tells the people. I think in the case of Iran, it's really the people who are telling the state that
Okay.
you cannot trust these people. And there's a lot of pressure on the government not to even negotiate with the United States anymore, which is an ongoing discussion. And it's, I think, a good discussion to have in Iran. But the point is that the population in Iran, they themselves are are more skeptical of the West, and sometimes some of our own leaders seem to be at times. But I think that the important point is that people like yourself, your problem is that you do not live within the dominant narratives, and so you're marginalized, but you see the reality. So people like yourself, you're not swimming in this huge river, a huge and powerful river of narratives, which these people are embedded in, and so they believe their own propaganda. They believe those so-called Iran experts that say what they want to hear, and who are well funded. And then those Iran experts or so-called Middle East experts, they get funding, then they bring in the politicians, give them excellent honorariums, then they get more funding. And this circle of wealth continues, and the narratives are constantly reinforced. That's what you hear in the media, that's what you see in think tanks. And so the expectation is that these narratives would ultimately show themselves to be true. And I think that the United States and the Israeli regime expected Iran to fall within days, like a house of cards. But for people like ourselves, it was clear as day that this would fail and it would have the opposite result. But we don't live in their bubble. We're not in the club, fortunately, and so we see reality as it is. So basically, what Trump has done is and this is not just about Iran. The entire world, I would say, from what I see, the global South, popular opinion, sides with Iran. And this is one of the ironies of the last 21 months, is that Iran, which has been demonized for well over 4 decades and been depicted as evil and backward and corrupt and medieval and sinister and a threat, perceptions of Iran have changed across the world. People now see that those who have been making all these accusations against Iran are apologetic towards the Holocaust. And they see that it is Iran and Yemen that are the only 2 governments in the world that are standing up for the Palestinian people. So the perceptions of Iran, both at home and abroad, have shifted dramatically. And this is something that I see through because I'm involved in media and with people like yourself. I see the reactions that I get, both through the messages that I receive, the interactions that I have with intellectuals and public figures, and the public. The West has not only destroyed its own image, but they've turned Iran and the axis of resistance into heroes for many people who until recently thought probably didn't have any positive feelings about this axis of resistance or Iran.
Let me shift to a different region and try to connect a dot, and hopefully it's a dot to be connected. I was reading a piece in Press TV about and please help me with the pronunciation, the Zangezur corridor in Azerbaijan, and Ali Akbar Velayati, who I had a chance to meet the last time I was in Tehran, a senior advisor to the supreme leader, is saying that there's a U.S.-Israeli plot to undermine Iranian security in this region of Azerbaijan. And I was wondering if this effort is due to the failure of the previous attack, and that the West is now seeing that the current government isn't going anywhere in terms of the as a result of or in response to the current efforts, and that now a new front has to be developed. And am I wrong to connect those dots?
Well, first, I think it's important to remember that the United States, in its support for Zionism, has undermined all religions in this part of the world. Most Christians were targeted by ISIS and Al Qaeda in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And ISIS and Al Qaeda were Western tools. We know, for example, I mean, there's a lot of evidence, but a simple piece of evidence was Jake Sullivan's email to Hillary Clinton on February the 12th, 2012, that WikiLeaks exposed, where he said in Syria, Al Qaeda is on our side.
Mm-hmm.
This was a decade after 9/11. And of course, before Syria, Al Qaeda, through Turkey and especially Qatar and other countries in the region, it was being supported in Libya to overthrow the Libyan government. But when they created ISIS and Al Qaeda, these groups ethnically cleansed, they slaughtered minorities.
Wait a minute, when you say they, when they created, who created?
Meaning Western intelligence agencies.
Thank you.
The Israeli regime and regional intelligence agencies that are linked to the West, the Turkish intelligence agency, Qatar, and oil and gas-rich countries in the Persian Gulf that are in the American camp. They're American proxies, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So the majority of Christians in Iraq have left the country due to the car bombings and the slaughter that was carried out, incidentally, by Ashara and by Jolani, the current president of Syria. Many of the car bombings carried out against civilians across Iraq during that period were carried out under his orders, under his command.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see the same thing in Syria, and of course in the West Bank and in Gaza, how the Christian Palestinians too are ethnically cleansed. So the West is more than willing to sacrifice Christians along with everyone else for the sake of the Israeli regime. What we're seeing in the area in Armenia,
mm-hmm.
which has a close relationship with Iran. Iran has an Armenian population, but also Iran has, I think, 3 Christian MPs. I don't know the exact number. I'd have to look at that. But Iran has 3 Christian MPs in parliament. In accordance with the constitution, Christians have to have representatives in parliament, just like we have a Jewish MP in parliament and a Zoroastrian MP in parliament. All of this is in accordance with the constitution.
Mm-hmm.
But so Armenia is under threat from Turkey and Aliyev, the dictator in the Republic of Azerbaijan. They want to take away Armenian sovereignty and create a bridge. And this is something that the United States supports and the West supports, because they want to surround Iran, and they're more than willing to sacrifice Christians to do so. Now, Iran is much more powerful than the Republic of Azerbaijan, and Iran will not tolerate this. And in fact, Iranians and Iranian Azeris are very angry at the regime in Azerbaijan because they've assisted the Israelis in their war against Iran. Many believe that the airspace of the Republic of Azerbaijan was used to carry out airstrikes in the north and the northwest of the country. The leader of Iran is actually Azeri, Khamenei, Ayatollah Khamenei. His name is Khamenei. His name is Khamenei. Khamenei means from Khamenei. Khamenei is an Azeri city. My own family name is Marandi. Marand is an Azeri city. It means from Marand. So uh, the Iranian, the number of people who are Azeri in Iran are much larger than in the Republic of Azerbaijan. And Iranians are more than willing, if push comes to shove, to deal with Aliyev in Azerbaijan. But what Iran is saying for the time being is that we will not allow the West to take away the sovereignty of Armenia in order to surround Iran. What they want to do basically is to cut off Iran's access to Europe and to Russia and to East and Black Sea by surrounding Iran with a belt that is controlled basically by NATO.
A couple more questions, and if you've got a couple more minutes.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Recently, I think just a few days ago, a Russian rocket put an Iranian communications satellite, the Nahid-2, into space. And this is the latest achievement for an aerospace program that is obviously causing an awful lot of consternation among Western governments. With the launching of this rocket, this does not, to me, sound like a country that's been quaking in its boots post the U.S.-Israeli attack in June.
No, definitely not. In fact, Iran also sends satellites into orbit, but because this Iranian-made satellite is very large, they gave it to the Russians to send into orbit. So this is an Iranian satellite. It's a large satellite. But you're absolutely correct. Iran, despite the maximum pressure sanctions, is a very technologically advanced country in all different fields. And we saw that during the war, despite this blitzkrieg attack carried out by this Western coalition with Netanyahu in the lead, we saw how Iran's missile program was able to hammer the Israeli regime, even though Western assets across the region were being used to support the regime. Radar bases in Turkey, in Qatar, in the Emirates, in Bahrain were used. Jordanian airspace, Iraqi airspace were used by the West, and Western anti-missile systems were based in the Mediterranean and inside the areas controlled by the Israeli regime to support the Israeli defense, both defensive posture, but also through its in its offensive attack. So despite this huge anti-Iranian coalition that included regional regimes, we saw that Iran forced the Israeli regime to request for a ceasefire. It wasn't the Iranians who asked for a ceasefire; it was the Israeli regime. And initially, and it seems very clear that Iran even gained certain concessions, because when there was a halt in hostilities, because it's not really a ceasefire, the halt in hostilities, when that happened, it became clear from Trump's own statement when he said Iran can export its oil to China that there was some sort of behind the scenes agreement or concessions that were given to Iran that led to this halt in hostilities. But I think what shows more than anything else that the Israelis lost this war, and it was Iranian technology that defeated them, was the very fact that Steve Bannon said that the real reason for this ceasefire was basically in this ceasefire was that Trump came to rescue Israel, and that's the untold story of this whole affair. So obviously, Iran is a very technologically advanced country despite the sanctions, and the West is not winning. It's not winning in Ukraine. It's not winning with Iran. It's Gaza has destroyed the image of the West, and I think that there's no way to calculate the loss for the West because of the way in which the world sees it. They're losing the economic war against China, and the reason is that the Western empire is overstretched, and the elites in the West simply live in a bubble, and they can't accept the fact that they don't have the power that they used to have.
Final two questions. You've mentioned Ukraine twice, and we're seeing develop in Ukraine unrest, a lot of now anti-Zelensky unrest. And I'm interpreting this as, or I'm just wondering, is it possible that the United States is fomenting another coup in Ukraine, now an anti-Zelensky coup? They're cooing the guy that they cooed for in 2014 with the Maidan coup. And I keep asking people, you better check where Samantha Power is, and you better check where I'm drawing a blank on the other woman's name that helped to foment the initial coup, the Maidan coup in 2014. Because if they're anywhere in the region with boxes of cookies, Zelensky's in real trouble.
Well, this isn't the first time. This wouldn't be the first time that the United States would carry out a coup, wouldn't it? It's also.
But it's a coup. It's a coup against the guy that they created the coup to bring into power in the first place.
Yes, but again, just like in
Victoria
Vietnam,
Nuland. That's who I was trying to think of.
That's
Victoria
right.
Nuland.
Yes, a Victoria Nuland, which
right. Where is she?
Done more. She's done more to destroy the United States, the strength of the power of the United States, and the image of the United States than probably anyone else in this world. But we saw that in Vietnam, that the Americans would take out their own man. It's not just remove him, but they kill him,
right,
if they felt that it suits their purpose. So whether Zelensky remains in power, if he's removed by the Americans and the British, it really. The reality is that Ukraine has lost the war, and we are moving towards a collapse in the military, on the military front. There will be a tipping point, and it seems that we're getting very close there. There's always been a debate about when the war will end and when the Ukrainian defenses will collapse. For a year now, or more than a year, some people have been predicting that the collapse is imminent. Some have been saying is further down the road. But I think that while with regards to the top timeline, many have made wrong predictions. But I think the trend, everyone who really is following things honestly, they recognize that sooner or later this is going to happen. And it seems from the way in which the war is being waged now that we are moving closer towards a collapse. And this will be a catastrophic defeat for Europe. And it is amazing how Trump is willing to squeeze the Europeans at the negotiating table over trade, and at the same time how the Europeans, while they kiss the ring in Washington, they're also willing to destroy the continent's economy further by pursuing this failed war.
And final question for you, Ansar Allah. I've been reading that al-Houthi has been very, very clear about escalating incursion or missile attacks in response to the weaponization of food and the starvation in Gaza.
Yes, they're expanding their siege on the Israeli regime, and from my understanding, is that they're going to target shipping companies that are cooperating with the Israeli regime, not just ships that are going to Palestine. And I think that is something that countries like Turkey and Egypt should be worried about, because their ships are often used to help to do trade with the Israeli regime. So it will be more. So in the past, they were targeting ships that were on their way to the regime's ports, or ships that were leaving ports. But now they're saying any company that deals with the Israeli regime, their ships will be targeted regardless of where they're going to. And of course, the reason for Ansarullah's escalation is because we are now seeing children dying of starvation in front of our eyes. And, Ansarullah, Hezbollah, the axis of resistance, they've been very heroic for the last 2 years. They're the heroes of our era, basically because they're not just they're sacrificing themselves for another people. The people of Palestine are defending themselves, the resistance, they're defending their people. But what Hezbollah has done, what Ansarullah has done, is that they've made huge sacrifices, not for their own people, but for another people. They've sacrificed their own people for another people. And this is, I think, the highest sacrifice. And history will remember them for this this act at a time of great night, of great darkness. We see shining stars in the capitals of Yemen, in the capital of Lebanon, at least the part where the resistance dominates. And meanwhile, though, the starvation continues.
This just popped in my head. Georgia's Abdullah just being released from a French prison and returning to Lebanon. When you mentioned Hezbollah, it just made me think about his release. What does that signal to the resistance?
Well, he is a great hero of the resistance, and he is a man who's been in jail for over 40 years because of his support for the Palestinian people. It remains to be seen what sort of impact he will have in Lebanon. He is Christian. Christians in Lebanon are divided. Some are in the pro-Zionist camp, and some are with the resistance. But his release, I think, is a huge moral boost for everyone who supports the resistance across the country and across the region. And he has been very vocal during the hour during this period after his release, and telling the region that and governments in the region that they should be ashamed of themselves for allowing this starvation to take place. He's a towering figure, and I hope one day, if I have the opportunity to go back to Lebanon, to meet him.
Dr. Seyed Mohammad Marandi, thank you for your time. You were very incredibly gracious to give me more, and I hope it was well worth your time. I truly appreciate it, and look forward to having you back.
Thank you, Wilmer. It's a great honor, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. Look forward to the next one. Take care.
You too.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.